I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. And today we're having a Safa Sunday.
Hello, everybody. My name is Safa Burnell. I am a cyberpunk and mythpunk author. I'm also an editor for a small press, and I freaking love books. You can find me
Yes,
online everywhere at Usurper Kings, and also on Twitch, X, Threads, Instagram, basically everywhere that you can have an at symbol. I am Usurper Kings. So it's great to see you. I hope everyone's having a fantastic time zone and you're looking forward to talking today about some really awesome books.
yes. Speaking of time zone, Miss Burnell, let's shout out our listeners. From where? I don't know yet, but let's see what are the countries listening to us for this week. Okay, Miss Burnell, can you
We
please read the countries listening to us for the last 30 days?
I'm going to say a big thank you and thanks very much to the country of Jordan. Thank you so much for giving us a listen, and also Mexico, Thailand, and the Philippines. Thank you absolutely from the bottom of my cold little authorial heart. Thank you for listening to Book 101 Review, and I hope you enjoy everything that we get to talk about, and I hope you continue to support Mr. Daniel Lucas and Book 101 Review.
Yes, people, thank you so much for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower writers, authors all over the world, like Miss Safa Burnell. So, Miss Burnell, let's talk about your books first. Ginun Gagap, when it will
Oh
come
my
out.
goodness. Okay, so Ginnungagap is coming closer to December. So we're going to have a winter release for Ginnungagap. That is the final book of the Judge of Mystics saga, the quartet of the saga. There's more that will be coming into the Judge of Mystics universe, but the saga itself is a quartet. And the explosive conclusion to Book of Revels is happening this winter. I'm so excited by it. It is going to be just incredible fun. We get to tie up loose ends. We get to find out what happened to Cormac Willow from Char and Ash. And we also get to have just some massive final battle action, which, if you were with us for a movie 101 review and our talk about Deadpool and Wolverine, then you'll already have known this. But for those of you who didn't quite get the chance to see movie 101 review yet, I'm a huge action fan. So I love putting action in all of my books. And I love that interplay between action and violence and that kind of thing, with really heartfelt and strong characters and vulnerable characters that come together and create senses of family, to create senses of love, and to create lots of lovely, lovely tension. So if that's your thing, then please do go ahead and visit safaburnell.com. That is SAPHABURNELL.com, or .ca if you're Canadian like us. And you'll be able to find out more information about my books, including Usurper Kings, Char and Ash, Son of Abel, Whiskey and Sinner's Blood, Neon Lieben, and my future project, Cagewire, and the audio drama Waxwing, which is going to be coming out next year.
Yes. And of course, Agape Make.
Yeah, and that was going to be
Yes.
coming out next year too. Agape Maki is closer to historical mythological fiction. You know, the main action of Agape Maki, which is coming out next year, takes place in the kind of Mycenaean period of Greek history, and then also has some time swaps to 1863. So we get to flip from the 1860s all the way to the ancient world and back again, telling the story of Aphrodite and Ares. And it's going to be luscious, it's going to be romantic, and it's going to have a lot of war. So
Lots of war. So, Miss Burnell, thank you for sharing your talents to the world. Thank you so much. And I hope more books to come
crossing those
to
fingers.
entertain us. So, Miss Burnell, what will be our topic for this month?
Oh, we are talking thrillers in action, and it's
Mm,
going to be a fantastic thing. So, a lot of years, when you get the stats of what books sold the best, there's kind of two main genres on the North American English language market that sell the best: romance and mysteries and thrillers. So it is a gigantic genre. It is huge. There's lots of incredible content out there when it comes to mystery, when it comes to thrillers specifically. We've all seen the ubiquitous copies of John Grisham novels or Tom Clancy novels in airports and at grocery stores.
Everywhere.
Everywhere books are sold. But it is a thriving genre. It is a wild genre. And it is an incredible series of tension and release and tension and release until you get to the absolute end. So these are your page turners. These are the books that grip you. These are the books that make you look at the world in a slightly different way. You've got things like Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. You've got The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. You've got Your House Will Pay by Steph Cha. You've just got some fantastic books within this zeitgeist building genre. And then you also have some of the older ones too. You've got the Tom Clancy's, you've got some other things like Mexican Gothic or What Lies Between Us, The Return of Ellie Black by Yumiko Jean. And there's just so many amazing books like The Island by Adrienne McKinty. That one is just another tense, suspenseful read until the very end. And thrillers just crawl up and down your spine like a thrill. So really excited to talk about them this month.
Yes. One time, Miss Bernal, I have a guest on Book One Review that one of her goals is to see the books in the airport. See,
Mm-hmm.
is that the gauge that if you see your books in the airport, you're already famous?
I
Is it?
mean, I absolutely, every single time I travel in an airport, I'm like, I wonder if I could talk to them. I'm always like, I would love to see my books at an airport. Absolutely. There's,
Yes.
local around here, there's an airport, the Abbotsford Airport. And I'm like, okay, maybe I could go up there and say, hey guys, I'm a local author. Can you carry my books? I'll make a special run just for you, whatever binding size you want.
Yes.
It's definitely something, getting your books into an airport or into a grocery store shelf. You're like, I have arrived. I have arrived. There's
I am
definitely a level of
right.
arrival with seeing your
Achievements.
books in the in the stores on the other side of the security glass in an airport. I would love to see that for myself, because
Yes.
I'm pretty sure I would go with the pen and sign them all. I'd be like, oh,
So,
I'm not defacing it. It's my book. I'm just signing it for you.
yes. So, what are the key elements that define a thriller novel, Miss Bernal?
So, the thrillers are a genre designed to elicit heightened feelings of suspense, excitement, and anticipation. So, you can't have a thriller without suspense and anticipation. Those are the two main ones. You have to be thinking, where's the monster? Where's the person? What's going on? Is it around that next corner? Well, what if it's around that next corner? Like you look, no, you look, no, you look, like that kind of sensation. They often involve a protagonist facing a significant threat or crime. There's lots of crime in thrillers, and that must be resolved typically within this kind of more fast pace. So with something like fantasy, usually, especially with fantasy, we see chapter sizes over 5,000 words. You see longer chapters in something like fantasy, especially epic fantasy or fantasy more inspired by Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of thing, A Song of Ice and Fire. You see a lot of kind of longer chapter lengths in something like fantasy. Thrillers are the opposite. And depending on who you talk to, and I remember talking to one editor of thrillers who was obsessed with the idea of 500 to 750 word chapters, which is a tenth, of what I'm used to seeing in fantasy. But their mind was that people want to be done a chapter quick and move on to the next thing and move on to the next thing, because they want that sense of heightened stakes and that short little bit of cliffhanger when you get to the end of a chapter before you turn the next page. And so they were saying that this one particular editor I was talking to was saying that, chapters between 500 and 1,500 words were kind of a standard for fairly new thrillers out there, with, a couple outliners here and there. And it's something that you don't necessarily see chapters that short in other genres for the most part. And it's definitely used as a mechanism to heighten the stakes, raise the suspense, and have those little tiny drop-offs where, too, you can kind of read a chapter when you're on the bus or you're on public transport, or you've got 5-10 minutes before the next thing. You could read another chapter, and then you could get to the end of that chapter and then go, okay, what's going to happen next? And then you're thinking, what's going to happen next? But because you can potentially digest it in shorter little bursts, per chapter, then the hope would be that the person's reading it kind of more and more, and I can do one more, I can do one more, I can do one more chapter before bed, I can do one more, and so that was the conversation I was having with that editor. Of course, that's not the only editor in the thriller genre, but it was interesting to see that, because especially coming from science fiction and fantasy, our chapters are usually quite a bit longer, so it's a different flow, a different process of releasing information, and a different level of suspense and excitement.
Yes. So do you think in the future you can produce a thriller novel?
Personally,
Yes.
I think I think there will be aspects of a thriller in some of the work that I do. Personally, I have edited something which you could kind of almost call a cyber thriller. Really, it's literary fiction with a science fiction bent, but Vostok by Lukas Drobnik. I've talked about Lukas Drobnik's work before. He is a Polish science fiction author. He's incredible at flash fiction, so you can get those really intense, really short chapters in there as well. But I worked as his editor on the project Vostok, which is his first novel. And it has sort of cyber thriller, spy versus spy elements to it. And so we skirted with some of those elements in the larger science fiction oriented world. And that was quite fun. It was quite fun, but Lucas was just such a joy to work with. His prose is just so melodic and so beautiful that even when he was talking about a murder on the side of the road, you're captivated by it. So that was basically the only project so far that has been more thriller oriented that I've worked on. And I would say that his work falls more into sci-fi and literary fiction, but oh my gosh, it was intense at times trying to figure out how we're going to fit in certain, like, where you put information, how you put the information in, and where it goes. Whether you're telling the story in a linear fashion, or whether you're playing a little bit around with this timeline, when you're allowing somebody to turn that corner and see the truth of a situation, and when you're not. Those were some of the big, issues is the wrong word, but those are the main things that we had to kind of grapple with there. And so that was a lot of fun, and one of my favorite novels I've ever worked on, because it's just so beautiful. It's just so good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So which author is often credited with popularizing the modern thriller genre?
Sorry, I missed the first part of the question. Who is the one popularizing the modern genre?
Yes, which author is often credited?
I mean, you can't get very far without mentioning John Grisham.
Yes.
So definitely I would say that he would be kind of the daddy of, especially when it comes to politics and political thrillers. I would say John Grisham would be the one that I would immediately go to. Now, there are some questions in a few areas about whether or not he wrote all of his novels himself, or whether or not there are a bunch of ghostwriters out there who also contributed. I'm not going to mention any of that kind of thing, because I don't know the truth of the situation. So I'll just say that I have heard a few things of people being like, how many novels a year? As somebody who can be prolific, it is a little bit like, oh wow, you're writing a lot there, buddy. Woo, how many books do you have out now? Oh, that many. but that will have to be answered by somebody who's a little bit more knowledgeable on that. Now, he practiced law for almost a decade and served in the Mississippi House of Representatives. So this is somebody who comes to sort of that legal strife that you get in a lot of thrillers, especially crime-based thrillers, and politics with political thrillers. He comes to that honestly. And I think that is what kind of brought the genre into what it is now, when you have that sort of sense of crime and justice, and when you have that sense of working within and outside of a system, where I find a lot of thrillers tend to live. Especially nowadays, I'm seeing a lot more thrillers that are dealing with people kind of bucking against the system and seeing corruption in it. And that corruption has always been there. And so you do still see that in other places, but I'm seeing it more now. I'm seeing it as a more prevalent motif. But you can't go very far into the thriller genre without mentioning things like The Pelican Brief, The Rainmaker, The Client, The Firm. A lot of these became movies as well as being novels, and they also just helped kind of build the foundation frame for what we think of when we think of a thriller. When we think of that person running away from somebody suited in a nondescript black suit, trying to get into an alley and into some form of restaurant and then out the other end, and you're sort of like, oh, are they right behind me? I gotta run. I've got to get this piece of evidence to this person before it's too late. That really, to me, was a motif that came alive in Grisham's works. And I mean, he is one of the best-selling authors of all time. I believe at this point, there's over 400 million copies of his work sold. I'll take a 100th of that, please. I think most authors would be very proud if they
Yes.
were able to even sell 4 million or 400,000 copies of their books. Heck, even 40,000 copies of their books. So I think people need to see, when they see a number like 400 million, stop. How many books is that? How did that happen? Well, because they're in the grocery stores and the airports.
In the airport.
And he's been a consistent player in this thriller market for decades, for years. So I really think that he's kind of the big daddy. He's the grandfather who brought it in. I think when it comes to more political thrillers as well, when you get into sort of military thriller side of things, you can't not talk about Tom Clancy and how precise he was with so much of his research. I remember as a girl, my older brother and I would go on little road trips with our mother when she was off work. And, we'd go to, our uncle's cabin, or we'd go, just across the strait to Victoria for a couple of days, things like that. Single mom, so those were our vacations. And she would bring Tom Clancy novels and books about real stories from the SAS. And those are the things that she would read us as children,
Yes.
And so I kind of grew up with Hunt for Red October and books in that kind of vein, and Tom Clancy novels were so well researched that they felt like they could have actually happened. And that too really brings me to the side of a thriller that kind of interests me. And again, I do mostly science fiction and fantasy. So anything which brings me back into the real world where people can actually look it up. They can look up that law that you're working with. They can look up, that place that you're going. That little village that you mentioned in one scene, people can look it up and they can find it on Google Earth and see if there is actually a donut shop on the corner. They can look up a lot of these things to see how real it actually is. And there seems to be more of an expectation towards reality in a lot of thrillers, that things could be more precise. And I think that that is quite just epic. You have to be incredibly well researched, and you have to be incredibly tight with your narrative otherwise, and keep it into places that you actually know, because otherwise people could almost smell it. And I like that about thrillers. I like how imaginative you can be with, sort of emotions that people go through, but the actual places are places that could potentially exist. And it's a very different thing for me to be able to talk about, and I quite like it, so here we go.
So, how do thriller novels explore themes of morality and justice?
So usually by the end of a thriller or a series of thrillers, justice is served. I think for me, the thriller novels that mean the most, the ones that I enjoy the most, are ones where you do actually see justice in the end. You see that the person trying to blackmail this other figure gets their comeuppance, or there's a piece of evidence that comes through, and then they're able to actually do the right thing. Or you see what justice should have been, and then are able to kind of be convicted in yourself about what should happen. And then you could take that into the real world around you and look at the world that we currently live in with different eyes. So I think, the big one for me is I really need justice to be done. And when justice is difficult because everything is in a shade of gray, I need to feel like the person with the worst intent is the one that gets the most comeuppance. So, intent means a lot. You get certain movies where like Double Jeopardy and things, where it's like, well, she already went to prison for that murder, so now she's actually going to commit it. She was the one the most wronged. She had the best intent out of everyone. So I like the fact that she actually made it in the end. That she got the job done, as it were. Um, I think using the legal system, using especially American type political systems, where you're able to see both the way that they're abused and the way that they can be upheld, that is an incredibly nuanced thing that you get to see in thrillers. I think that also gives us the ability to see, what justice is versus what it looks like. What should justice be? What is justice in this moment? What corporation is sort of a part of that, and how wrong is that, and how do we take that into looking at our own lives, into looking at the corpocracies creeping in the shadows of our lives without us thinking about them. I also think that morality, however gray it may appear, there are certain universals that should come through. The mistreatment of anybody is mistreatment. That's not okay. Like, I want
Yes.
that person who conducted whatever act it was to have their comeuppance in the end. I need to see that. I need to see that justice is at least in some way, shape, or form done. So,
Yes. For sure. I love watching Law and Order. It's like you're watching a thriller too. So, Miss
yeah.
Bernard, before we go on, I want to invite you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, our first season with Chef Alessandro, one of the specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. And please do listen to my upcoming episode this coming Monday with Miss Elizabeth Solaro. We're gonna talk about how to make a fabulous, fabulous cakes because she is making uh cakes for the royalties and more famous people. Miss Elizabeth Solaro, people. Food 101 Monday 9 a.m. PST. So please do tune in. Food 101. So Miss Bernal, how important is the setting in creating an atmosphere of suspense in a thriller novel?
Incredibly important. As we've seen with novels based in the United States versus novels based in, say, Denmark or other places in Europe, the setting itself is a character. The setting itself is sort of a platform to see whether or not I'm going to suspend disbelief enough to enjoy this novel, whether I'm going to suspend disbelief enough to think, yeah, this could actually happen. And this is where I would tell people who are writing their first novel, maybe they do want to write a thriller, go with what you know. If you've traveled to a place, if you've lived in a place, if you've been to a place quite a bit, then, stay where you know for the first bit and then kind of expand your knowledge from there. Not that you can't write something in another place, but there is an authenticity to writing in places that you've actually been. And the way, learning the way people talk, learning the way they have their coffee, learning the way they have their tea, learning, what snacks do they eat, what cakes do they have during special occasions,
Yes.
like in Food 101 review. All of that kind of thing is incredibly important because, again, with thrillers, somebody can look it up. If somebody lives in Copenhagen and you're talking about the highway going through the middle of the city and there isn't one, then that's not good research. Why, I wonder, are you writing in Copenhagen instead of a place that you actually know? For me, I tend to put quite a few things in Vancouver or Vancouver Island. I tend to put lots of things in places here in British Columbia. I also tend to write about places in England that I have where I have actually been and stayed, and the same thing with Norway, and the same thing with West Africa, because I've been there, because I've spent time there. I've spent months on end, going between these places. And so there's a certain amount of experience that I do have, having been steeped in that culture and steeped in that place. Um, Obviously, you can't own something that you don't share a part of, but I think it is important when it comes to thrillers to make sure that that sense of place is paramount. The way that the city of New York works, the way that it feels when you're walking towards a cab, it's very different than, say, going through Toronto or going through Vancouver or even going to Seattle. Copenhagen is very different feeling than Oslo. Oslo is a very different feeling from Edinburgh. Edinburgh is a very different feel from London or from York. And so finding those bits that make that setting into a character, that bring, maybe Amsterdam's red light district to life, maybe bringing the ancient Roman fortifications and ancient Viking fortifications in York to life. I love going through there and just like being on the bus and passing through the walls around the old fortifications of Jorvik, which is now York. It's just incredible to see, and incredible to see how people still use those places and that feel. I think that when setting is another character, then you're telling a very intimate story of that place. You're telling a very keen thing that you couldn't necessarily tell anywhere else. And that's where it belongs. Whether it is a cozy mystery kind of situation where you've got some small town in the middle of some state somewhere on the east coast of the United States, or whether you are telling a thriller about inter-gang activity in Vancouver. You'd better have been to Vancouver. It's a
Yes.
pretty interesting place.
Try to visit Vancouver. I like the
Mhm.
new buildings. I don't forget the name, Miss Burnell. What do you call that buildings? A new one, like a ladder.
Oh my
I
goodness. Yeah,
forget the
there's so
name.
many going up now. I'm like,
Awesome.
oh yeah. So fun.
Very well
Even going from Vancouver to
said.
Richmond. Like, you better know the difference between Richmond and Vancouver because it's very different.
Yes. Very well said, Miss Burnell. And to sum up what we are talking about, how do characters' flaws and secrets contribute to the tension in thriller
Oh.
novels?
I would say without those secrets and those plot twists and red herrings, you don't have a thriller. Like without characters and their secrets, and when you give certain bits of information, whether or not something ends up becoming a false ending, or whether or not something twists the plot, if you don't have those, you don't have a thriller. And so having your characters have secrets, having your characters not reveal that information right away. I remember too, years ago when I was editing my first few novels, many moons ago, not that many, but a few. And
Yes, I go.
one of the writers I was working with, who was also an editor himself, was talking about how disappointed he was that he didn't see enough characters lie in storytelling. I was like, oh yeah, because in a lot of books, you end up having the character and immediately be found out and tell the truth. Well, I don't want to confuse the audience. Well, the thriller you're supposed to. So why is this character telling the truth? Why are they
Yes.
admitting to this thing? Why are they talking about that? Why aren't they lying about it? I think using kind of false starts, using false middles, having those plot twists, having the character lie to one person and not to another person, and seeing the depth of their webs. I mean, people are complicated. And so it is so fun to see when those plot twists create the cliffhangers necessary for a thriller to exist.
Yes, people, we are talking about thriller novels for the month of August. So please tune in next week again because we're gonna continue our discussions about thriller novels. So, Miss Bernal, thank you for your time.
And thank you for yours. I hope everybody has a fantastic day. Make sure to check me out online at Usurper Kings. I would love to say hi.
Yes, thank you so much. And more to come, people. See you soon.